Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me for Let's Chat. My name is Shayla Reeves, and today we're going to be talking about people who use their platforms to create space for conversation. It's kind of like the concept behind Let's Chat, but I wanted to invite some other folks to join us and share how they've been using their platforms to elevate other voices, to have important conversations, and create room and space for dialogue for people to move forward. So I'm going to quickly play an intro to allow everyone a few more minutes to join us, a couple of minutes, and then we'll be back to launch into the conversation.
I always like to create an environment where people feel comfortable to ask questions. You don't always know what you don't know. You may not have it all figured out today, and that's okay. Taking one step at a time, those glimmers become a consistent light. It all finally begins to click. Each and every moment that you experience is shaping the person you are in this life to be.
Sometimes our pain points go all the way back to childhood.
What if I allowed myself to imagine a life that was more spacious and expansive than the one I'm living?
What if I don't have to live the same way that everyone else is living?
When you are authentic, your energy changes and the people around you change. It's just like doors just start opening. You're like, well, wait, how did this happen? How did this happen? How did this happen? You're showing up completely different.
And often it does require healing and going in some uncomfortable spaces before we can truly flourish.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me for Let's Chat. My name is Shayla Reeves, and I'm going to bring up all of our participants today. And I'm going to give each of them a minute or two to tell us a little bit about themselves, and then we'll launch into our conversation about creating space for conversation. So without further ado, we'll bring up JC Lippold, Ericka. We've got Jasmine Stringer here and Jesse Ross. Thank you all so much for joining me today. JC, I'll start with you. If you could tell me a little bit about you, your background, your platform, and how you're creating space for conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the conversation of all conversations I'd love to be in, because conversation is where I dive into most of my work. So as a personal development coach, I spend time holding space for people. Mainly 5K everyday conversations, which I think we'll end up probably chatting a little bit about today. On January 1st, 2020, I started holding daily space for conversational movement. So each day, people have the opportunity to show up and move with people that they don't know yet. Maybe we call them strangers. I like saying people we don't know yet instead, because after moving together, all of a sudden people go, wow, we're sharing things we maybe wouldn't share with someone if we're just sitting down face to face and having that confrontational moment, right? You start moving, you start experiencing a world around you and a world that's ever changing, and all of a sudden really powerful connections start happening. So I'm excited to share a space with y'all this evening.
Thank you so much. And Ericka, please go ahead.
Hello. First of all, thank you so much, Shayla. I am a journalism major, so I'm really admiring that you are producing and directing this, the ticker, and bringing all of this together. So I commend you for doing all the roles. For myself, conversations, really it sparked with me being curious and really learning about individuals' stories when I was younger. And that's why I went into journalism. And now in my role full-time as a DEI leader, a lot of the stories from individuals are what connects them through commonalities and through differences, and creating the space for people to fail forward, to say the things that need to be said so that we could actually be in the conversation, and creating that safe space, the psychological safe space is really important to me, especially as well as a yoga teacher. Oftentimes we hear things that students may confide in us about, and really holding the space. It's not really absorbing that energy of it, and it's just allowing for others to be heard and to be seen, and to feel like they matter. So that's the space that I like to hold.
Thank you so much, Ericka. I appreciate it. Let's see. Jasmine, would you like to go next?
Yeah. Hi, Shayla and everyone. Hi. Thank you so much for having me today. So, I live my life by two words, carpe diem, which is Latin for seize the day. And I try to inspire people to seize each and every day in my work as a professional speaker, lifestyle expert, and consultant. And really, we focus on campaigns that provide inspiration and boost engagement. You wanted me to talk about a campaign that I founded last year as a result to George Floyd's murder, or in response to George Floyd's murder, called Share the Mic Minnesota, really focusing on starting the conversation and sharing our stories, because I know that our stories are the most powerful tool that we possess to build connection.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Jasmine. And last but not least, Mr. Jesse Ross.
Hello, everyone. Great day. I'm an executive coach, diversity and inclusion leader, and I think the most important title that I hold is husband and father. I've been very active in my community for as long as I can remember, and I think the story of my people, if we talk about historically, family-wise, there's just been storytelling that has always kind of been passed down generationally. And so I'm always thinking about the narratives, how we can correct those narratives, how we can make sure that we share the correct narratives, but also use conversation to engage with people and to learn more about each other.
All right. Thank you so much, Jesse. And I'll go ahead and stay with you for the first question. I know one of the initiatives that you started as well in response to a lot of the civil unrest last year with the murder of George Floyd, and a lot of the community really trying to figure out, who are we as Minnesota? What, this is real that people in Minnesota don't all experience Minnesota in the same way. So you came up with an idea to offer a space where you could allow people to come in and answer and ask some of the questions that they may have, but they don't really know who to ask. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So what you're referring to is the anti-racism conversations. And I think I've been holding and hosting conversations pretty much since I've been an adult, as far as with young people, big, little people, grown adults, kind of in that conversation. And so when I recognize, I did a training just as a way to kind of offer some perspective around white privilege, around what was happening in the community and really what was happening around the world. And it really sparked from having a training. There were about 21 folks that showed up, all were white, 20 women. And then the question in the conversation was, hey, where are all the guys? And, in the sense of recognizing that at that rate, we were just recognizing that most of the white men were the ones who were in positions of power, or those who were causing some of the drama or the extra stuff. And so I just kind of put something out. I did not anticipate the amount of followers that would tag other people to say, hey, Jesse's looking for some conversations. And so actually literally a year ago in August, we started the conversations with white men. And what I thought was just going to be like maybe 10 coffees turned into about 50 or 60 people on a Zoom call. And then in January, we started the conversations with white women. And so it's really a safe space to have, like you said, for folks to be able to ask questions, but really to create a community of practice, a community of learning, a community of unlearning, and then really engaging in some conversations that we all know that we need, but are afraid to really put in the work. And so I don't really love talking about the problems. I love talking about solutions. So that's kind of where that came from, and we're still going to this day.
And I wanted to ask you, what has this process of creating this space taught you, or what are you learning along the way that maybe you weren't expecting to learn, if anything?
It's a great question. Now, when you had me on here, I was going to be real honest and transparent.
Yes.
So I'll say a few things. I think if you're a person of color, especially in Minnesota, or maybe you live in a state that is predominantly a lot of white Americans, I don't think people of color are looking for, and use air quotations, more white friends, right? Now, that doesn't mean that they don't need or can't benefit from having more white folks around them. But so that's one thing. And I think that's been apparent. I would say the second thing is what I've always wanted to do is create a space where people can have honest conversation, but also can foster growth. And so there are a lot of folks, particularly white folks, who are afraid to ask questions or afraid to do the wrong thing. And a lot of that is really rooted in white supremacy culture. And so we really unpack that. But really kind of get it down to a basis level. And I would say the last thing, something that I have personally set for myself is no matter what space I'm in, I want to be able, whether it's a year from now, 6 months from now, 6 years from now, to be able to remain who I am. So remain the direct person, remain the person who lives off integrity and the values that I have, and also being very transparent. But relationships are very important to me. And so through those three things, I've learned a lot and continue to evolve and grow. But also, I think the best part has been the learning experience that I get to share with other people in the process.
And as you've continued to grow and expand your work, you and JC have connected. Can you tell me about you all's connection, JC, and how you all have worked together to really inspire the community and bring the community on board and really create these collaborations that bring people together?
Yeah, so 5K Everyday Conversations started January of 2020 with the intent of being able to hold space every day. And then, of course, everything of the last 19 months has questioned, can we still find space where people can value what may often be seen as having little value, and that is simple, daily, organic conversation and connection. I was listening and learning from Jesse on a call, much like what he was just speaking about. And he spoke about how he didn't, and Jesse, I'm kind of paraphrasing, so thanks for the grace, how he would normally move early in the morning from his house, and he didn't feel safe doing so with the climate in North Minneapolis at the time. Because of the people who were making his neighborhood unsafe. So I reached out. I was like, "Hey, Jesse, I'll come and move with you in your neighborhood." And in that moment, a simple connection of two people who we knew of each other. We'd been in the same space, but someone who's now very much one of my closest confidants, brothers, best friends, grew out of us saying there's value to people sharing space with no intent, with no motive outside of being next to each other, which then this turned into a Wednesday morning, 4 a.m. North Minneapolis exposure for people who may be afraid of going downtown because 99% of Minnesotans are taught that North Minneapolis is the place that you don't go, and 99% of Minnesotans have spent 0% of their whole life in North Minneapolis. So it's been a daily, weekly opportunity to provide people the opportunity. And some days people do, some days people don't. But our line of success is if we hold space for people, people have the opportunity to maybe, like Jesse shared, be less afraid of asking the questions or sharing their truth and beginning that shift.
So really breaking down barriers and challenging people to really question their fears, because fear is really, it keeps us from getting to know each other. It keeps us from traveling to a different part of town or getting to know the person that's down the street from us, because maybe they look a little different than us, or maybe they have an accent that we don't recognize. And so we're missing out on all the vibrant beauty and joy that could be behind that exterior, because we're keeping ourselves away from something that could be amazing at a life-changing friendship, because sometimes people feel it's safe to just stay where you are and not challenge the world as you've always seen it.
Yeah, fears are dusty and stale, right? The longer we keep them on the shelf, they get dustier and more stale, and we forget that they're there. So offering those spaces, because again, like I even think about this call, like I met Jasmine through these similar conversations. Ericka came to an early North Minneapolis 4 a.m. run, and and shared such powerful words on that, like the connections that happen through simple moments of conversation. This is evidence right here of that.
And then those relationships and those connections build partnerships that bring more people together to different spaces and elevate different voices, which is something you've been able to do, Jasmine, through your Share the Mic initiative. What have you learned that surprised you the most since you've created that space of connecting people? And what did you hope to accomplish? And what do you feel that you're accomplishing now that it's in motion and has been for a while?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. I will say this, that I am a person that has never met a stranger. My parents always say that I was a precocious child. I talk to everyone. I will even talk to a plant. But out of my pain, out of my self-doubt last year and wondering, like, how can I be a part of the solution when everyone's talking about the problems in our world? Share the Mic Minnesota was born. And to date, we've had over 306 people participate throughout our various collaborations, and we continue to go. We were launched last year in July. And I think, what shocked me in the beginning was the amount of people that were like, yes, I want to participate in this. And then as many people were willing to participate, we pair Black and brown women and people from marginalized communities with people that step up and say, I want to be an ally. And they allow someone to take over their social media platform for the day. The relationships that bloomed from, a preliminary conversation and then the quote unquote mic share. I know JC and Ericka have both participated in the campaign, and I'm sure they can share their experience, but it's just been amazing, one, to see the relationships between the partners and the allies, and then the collective relationships, or what we call the halo effect of the community growing. I think people are, to Jesse's earlier point, people are scared and people want a safe space where they can begin to unpack some of these uncomfortable topics around race and equity and equality. But just in general, people don't talk to people they don't know, or people that are strangers. So how can we, a simple hello and a smile goes a long ways these days.
Absolutely. And before we go forward, I'm going to share some of the comments we received. Kim Sunday said, well said, JC, on your last point. The best relationship begins with one person seeking to understand another. Kim also adding to Shayla's point, no growth ever comes from fear. And Mary's so refreshing to see you on television. Love watching. Thank you so much, Mary. If you have any sort of comments, if you're watching, or anything you want to share with us, a question for anyone participating, be sure to share that, and we'll try to get some of those on the screen or ask your questions of everyone participating today as well. Ericka, could you add as well? I know JC mentioned that you got involved in his effort as well, but I know you're also involved in the yoga community and trying to create space for more people there as well. And can you talk a little bit about that, the successes you found, and what what you hope to teach those that you're trying to reach?
Yeah, for me, yoga has been a really foundational practice. And just going off of what everyone has said, when we're able to really connect with self, everyone thinks yoga is a workout, and really it's an inner working. It's a working in to excavate things that we're holding on to. May it be fear, may it be limited beliefs, limited stories. And I personally believe that through the practice, through breath, meditation, when we're able to let go, the practice of yoga is all about letting go. When we're able to let go and heal thyself, then we can be able to be more responsive to others. And for me, the practice like yoga, the asana, the movement, and really knowing and feeling what is stored in my body. Is it stress? Is it anxiety? Is it fear? I can feel it in our body. Our body keeps score. And through breath, like really noticing the shortness of breath. If my breath is short, there's something I might be in reaction about. And meditation. And it's really about getting quiet and tuning out the noise. JC and I actually lead, along with a dear friend of ours, a monthly meditation course. And it's really about checking in, getting quiet, and going in deeper so that we're able to be more conscious leaders, be more responsive. What we've seen over the past year, what I've seen and what I've experienced is that we've experienced a lot of grief and a lot of trauma. And that keeps score. We think we're good and we say we're good and we keep going. And we've gotten to this like tipping point. It's almost like this volcano that's really exploded. And, actually today I was teaching this in a class. If we could all just step back behind that and watch it and observe it, not needing to react, not needing to call it out in the moment, not needing to cancel it. Like, right, if a bird is flying in an area, like a bird doesn't know where it's flying, it just flies. And so it doesn't ask, like, should I be in this neighborhood or that neighborhood? And we don't go down hunting down the birds when they're out of their jurisdiction, right? So we, like for me, the canceling culture is really what's keeping, in my personal opinion, is not keeping us in the conversation. And when we're able to create safe spaces and excavate out what happened and allow for people to like admit when they did something wrong, like we teach that with kids, we teach them when you do something wrong, learn from it. And so where did we lose that as adults, right? Where is that compassion as adults? And so for me, like that practice of yoga brings in the compassion, the empathy, and allows me to look at myself. It's not about a level of righteousness, but, for myself in yoga, it would be remiss of me to say that particularly in Minnesota and Minneapolis, a huge part of that is needed is more people of color who are in yoga studios where it's more equitable. And we see more and more teachers who are teaching. And it's something that I'm extremely passionate about. When I moved to Minneapolis 5 years ago, I didn't see one teacher that looked like me. And that's when I went into teacher training. And I've been teaching yoga ever since. And it's something that's really, it's important that we look to see who is missing. And then we invite them into that space, because yoga may not be for everyone. You don't have to be flexible. It's breath. I always tell people, if you're breathing, you're doing it. And so everyone's doing it here. Like if you're holding your breath, there's something you just need to let it out and exhale it out. But that there is a need, because I really do believe that it is one of the transformational practices that will create a collective healing for our community, for our society, and well-being that we need over the past year and a half of what we've experienced.
Such a great point. And Jasmine, you want to add to what Ericka's talking about?
Yeah, I'll add two things. Just on that last comment about breath. This is entertainment, but D Nice saved so many people during the quarantine. My mom is like a huge fan of D Nice, and his whole line is "Let it breathe." And so there is power in returning to the breath. And I always try to center myself in every new experience, even before this call, with just some deep breathing and some exhaling, and then allowing myself to feel the energy and the space. And I think you're spot on, Ericka, when you say, mentioned, this cancel culture. I spent a lot of my time in rural Minnesota, and I had an opportunity to do an international farm experience. And the advisor said, I want you guys to come to every experience while we were in Croatia, and not think about it as an American farm or your farm or what you would see, but look at it from a lens of neutrality. And I will tell you, that has been a game changer in my life and how I approach situations, as opposed to saying, why are they doing it that way? Or did they ever think they should do this? Or that's not how I would do it. But just coming to a situation as, this is the situation. This is the experience that I'm having. Let's chatting tonight. This is the experience. And I'm going to absorb and participate for what it is in this moment.
It's such a great point. Jesse, would you like to add to that?
Not really. I agree.
Yeah.
I have the practice of making sure, one, I don't re-explain or mansplain anything that two dope women already said. So no, you're not gonna get me on that one.
Okay, well, no worries. I saw you nodding, so I was like, maybe you got something to add. I don't want to leave anybody out.
No, I'm good.
So one thing I did want to talk about, and I think Ericka kind of touched on this a little bit, and I feel like I've heard people say before, they'll definitely post it in the social media comments if there is a story sometimes that is focused on like Black student receives like 12 scholarship offers, and the conversation goes to, why does it matter that they're Black, or why does it matter that they're this, or why does it matter that they're that? And sometimes it's I think if you are that kid or that person of color, you want to be what you can see. And so to be able to see someone that looks like you aspire and achieve something, it lets you know that that's possible for me too. How important do you think it is and has this come up for you, Jesse, in some of your classes and some of the questions that people may ask in your sessions? Because I think when you live in a world where maybe the representation maybe for powerful positions, a lot of those folks they all look like you, then you may not know what that experience is to be someone of color in that same space where no one else in that space does look like you. So you experience the same space in a different way.
Yeah. So I think you said it too. Like, first thing, representation does matter. I don't care what anybody has tried to dispute or say that it doesn't matter. It does. And there's something that goes there. There's one thing for the pioneer who creates the thing that has never been done, right? And they're gonna get attention and praise and accolades and all of that stuff. But it's a very lonely road for that person. And then there's something for the person who never sees someone who looks like them, but has this idea or this dream or this passion to accomplish something that they just feel like that's what they're supposed to do, right? And it's not even just wishing on a star, but it's I feel this thing inside of me that I'm supposed to do this. And I know all of you, even whether, no matter how many jobs we've worked or are working currently, we all feel that thing. I think it's very important to inspire people, but also to deposit the option and the opportunity of you can, right? And so when it comes to folks that are Black and brown, or people that have been marginalized historically, people from LGBTQIA communities, I mean, we can go on and on about different diversity dimensions. I think it's always important for people to see someone who represents them, whether it's that idea, whether it's the dream, the goal, the passion, or just the fact of like, you know what, I know I'm not crazy, right? So I would just say like that's one thing. I think the other piece is, yes, it's come up, and people don't know a lot of historical, I would say, how culture has impacted and influenced why those numbers have been rare and so far and few in between. And so to one person, it may seem like, oh man, I've only seen, these things on TikTok and Instagram and social media about all these, kids of color who are getting into these Ivy League schools. But that might be normal in one community. I'm all for changing the narrative and recognizing that just because you don't see it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And so part of my goal has always been, okay, well, I know that my calling, my passion, my energy towards things has always been different, and I'm okay with that, but also to make that the norm. And so whether it is the entrepreneur, whether it is the person who has 3 or 4 jobs, whether it is the person who has multiple college degrees or a trade, whatever that thing is, giving them the opportunity to recognize that this also is normal, and that you should be proud of who you are and who you want to become.
All right. Jesse, Jonathan Parker says you have a calming voice. I agree.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
And JC, I just want to ask you, because I know you're involved in so many things. I had asked about 5K everyday conversations, but I know you're passionate about movement, getting the community together, getting people active, not just through conversations, but just through the events that you're behind. What has, engaging in the community in this way, what are you learning about the folks that come out to your events, about the connections and the friendships and the relationships that are coming out of just getting people moving, and creating space for people to get together in this way? What has it taught you along your journey?
Yeah, and even listening to all of you, how quickly in this world do we want to get to the place where here's everything that I've learned and here's the easy statement that wraps it all up? I think of like in movement, we hear things like just be a little bit better than you were yesterday. It's such a cancerous thing to say to somebody, because if we're just supposed to be better than we were yesterday, and that happens throughout life, this is what life looks like, and every day we just get better and better and better and better. I have never met that person. So then we get that idea in our head that we're not doing it, we're not good enough, which then creates these separations between us and how we think of everybody else exists. And movement is often that most glaring opportunity industry that separates people. So I often use movement as that catalyst. Every day, literally every day since January 1st, 2020, I've had people go, well, I can't run, or I don't like running, or I'm going to slow someone down, or I'm going to, like, this is a conversation group. It's not a running group. There's many days, actually a majority of the days, we walk, and we call that running because the spirit's running, the mind's running, the ideas are running, the discomfort turning into catalyzed friendships is running. But I think Ericka just said something to me. So I just finished grad school, and Ericka just started grad school. And Ericka said something that I'm like, oh my gosh, how quickly did I forget this? She said how the more you get into the learning process, the more you sit in the seat of student, the less you know, the less you speak, the more you're open to going, I need to take in more. And I think that's what being vulnerable in movement, being vulnerable in conversation, walking into an experience, like I'm going to connect with someone, I'm going to connect with myself, and then I'm going to be left with this list of questions that provides me the opportunity to go, I don't need to know the answer. I need to be willing to wrestle with where I am. So, yeah.
And I was going to just say something you made me think of is it's very scary, I think, for some people, the vulnerability that is required to say, I don't know, or I don't know everything, or to acknowledge, even if the thing that you don't know to learn it, maybe you have to go through someone who doesn't look like you to learn it. And so you have to break down those walls, and in order to just be able to hear the information, to hear something new, and give yourself a chance to grow beyond the space that you're in. And like so many of you all have said, and Jasmine said earlier, it's just, saying that hello, going out and extending that handshake to that stranger, and giving them that welcome smile and that invitation to come in and get to know you. Because in some ways, Jasmine, that's your strength. Like that's your gift, is the gift of, you have such a welcoming personality, and that gift is one that brings people together, brings in people that maybe, are on the fence or are unsure or uncertain about, can I fit here? Can I be in this space? And just by virtue of being how you are, you create space for people, even beyond your share the mic, but in all the other ways, just by how you show up. And as we're talking about you, got some nice comments here. Let's see. Mary Angel Gomez says, Jasmine is the master connector. She makes everyone feel seen, heard, and loved. Long before she founded Share the Mic Minnesota, she's been inviting everyone to the table and furthermore creating tables. Such an awesome point. Thank you so much. Jasmine, would you like to add?
I was listening to you, and then I was thinking about my response, and then I saw Mary Angel's comment. And hi, Mary Angel. Mary Angel lives in Mexico City, so thank you for tuning in this evening. I would say that, again, like I said, this is authentically who I am. And I remember a woman in a Bible study that I went to was telling her testimony, and she goes, I try to greet everyone positively because I might be the only Christian or the only little bit of Jesus a person sees. And, I have this cross on. So I take that with me in the spaces. I take that I might be the only Black person a person is having an encounter with. I might be the only female a person is having an encounter with. I might be the only Black female that a person is having an encounter with. So I bring all of these layers of descriptions that make up who I am, or descriptions that the world has given me. And, I just think that kindness goes a long ways. Ericka spoke about this collective trauma that we are all experiencing. And I never would have used trauma as a word to describe how I was feeling until about 15 months ago. And I think that we all have to acknowledge that, trauma, there's a spectrum. There are 3 different types of trauma, but we are all traumatized after this COVID pandemic, the new awakening to racial inequities and inequalities, the mental health pandemic that no one is really speaking about, and then all of the things that we as individuals have been juggling through the pandemic, whether it's remote learning, working from home, spending a lot of time with your family, being removed from your family. I used to see my parents all the time. I hadn't gone home in 18 months, and that was hard not to see my parents. So we are all dealing with a lot. So I say hello, and grace and empathy will go a long way.
Such a great point. Let's see, Jonathan is sharing, the way to connect to people is the hungry will to learn something that lies outside of your own subjective perspective. And he also adds that kindness goes the whole way. Such a great point. Ericka, I wanted to ask, I guess, through your diversity, equity, and inclusion work, as Jasmine mentioned and others, it's been a challenging last 15 months, and people are really experiencing so many shifts and changes. Maybe life looks a lot different from them, just their immediate life. Maybe somebody lost a job, maybe they lost hours, maybe the thing that they always thought was going to sustain them isn't there anymore, and they're just trying to figure it out on top of all of the social, civil unrest that the community has seen, people, really having to look deep and question, wait, is this community that I've always lived in, or are we really this way? And, it's been a lot to unpack. And I wanted to ask, I guess, for you, what have been some of the things that the last year have taught you, or how has your teaching of diversity and equity and inclusion evolved in light of all the things that people are tackling, and what's really been a busy, all-encompassing experience on so many levels for so many of us?
Loaded question on so many levels.
Yeah.
And I love this question. The first thing that I really think about when it comes, where this has really stretched me in this space is to really step back. There was a lot of charge and a lot of monolithic viewpoints on how, for me, this is my experience of how Black individuals should respond, how they should feel, how white individuals need to respond. All of it, to me, it was very overwhelming. And I needed to really step back and listen. And as a leader, I work in an organization that is, it's a global organization. So for me, being that this reverberated around the world, I also then had to tune out to see how is this conversation now impacting other regions across the world. Because right here in the United States, we're really thinking about when it comes to race and ethnicity, and another country, it could be around socioeconomic status, right? Or it could be around basic needs. And so I had to really laser out. And then for me, I had to get really quiet. Where do I land? And there was a lot of, I'm originally born and raised in Lincoln, Nebraska, and I'm really grateful for my experience there in high school, particularly. But I had to do a lot of self-care for myself with my experience in Black culture and in white culture. And that story, for myself, being that I grew up in the Midwest, that story wasn't being shared a lot. What does it feel like? And so for me, there was a level of vulnerability to share that part of it, because I didn't feel tired. I've been in this space for over 14 years. I was like, this feels like the Super Bowl. But what felt very fatiguing was the noise and reaction. There wasn't this moment of breath to let me get my head on straight. The walls have been knocked down, because mind you, my leadership in this was stretched during the election, not last year's election, the election before that. So that really pivoted for me. And the second part of your question, I wanted to add on a little bit with what Jesse and Jasmine were saying about representation. I'm in grad school right now, specializing in diversity, equity, and social justice. And for me, what I realized when I shared that with JC is I don't know anything. And what I realize is that I'm also part of the problem, right? And there's studies. I am a Black female sitting at the intersectionality of gendered racism, and what am I doing about that? What am I doing about really in workplaces? It's not a glass ceiling for women, that. To me, it doesn't make sense. A glass ceiling. We can see it. It's visible. It's really about the low brick wall for women and the concrete ceiling for women of color, particularly Black women. And so I had to really refine and hone in on where is it that I wanted to be an advocate, and where do I want to laser my focus in, and how can I look at policies and practices that are deeply embedded into work cultures that make things inequitable. And right now, for me, I am lit on fire about Black women in the workplace, because it is it's one of the biggest inequities, and it is an epidemic when it comes to mental health and the well-being of Black women. And it's something that is not being discussed widely enough. It's being studied a lot, and the solutions are all the same. And so for me, that's where I'm honing in on, because the landscape in this is wide. And I am like, okay, I got to narrow in on that one piece. Jesse has this conversation with anti-racism. Great. He's over there. Jasmine's doing Share the Mic and elevating these stories. Great. You got it there. Like picking a lane and really like finding the tunes and really educating and going down there. And so for me, that's where I've had to refine. And so when I look at, in Ibram Kendi's book, he talks about being an anti-racism and feminism. And to be a feminist is also to be anti-racist. And so when I think about where I have been, admittedly, at status quo, when it becomes to doing what I can to chip away the concrete ceiling for Black women in the workplace, there's growth that I have to do there. And that's like where I'm in an inquiry about it. And it's okay that we are in inquiry and we can be quiet, for those who are processors, and in action at the same time. And they don't all have to be, like one is not bad or the other. So that's how I've really grown to allow those all live together for sustainable change. And the last thing that I will share is I think that our generation last year was a real wake-up call. 2020 was the reckoning and the revealing for our generation to really step up from what was done from generations past. Gen Z, when you look at millennials and Gen Z, what their expectations are for the future when it comes to equality, equity, and social justice. It's really pushed all of us to really be the change that we want the future to be. And so I think that it's really stretched us, and we can do hard things. We can do hard things together as a society and as a community. And, I always think back to what my grandfather, if he was alive, he'd been like, I've been here. I just think about that, like the older generation, like what they've been through and what we went through last year. Yeah, it was hard, and we can do hard things.
Yeah. And something that you said that kind of struck me, it can feel overwhelming when you think about all of the things and oh my gosh, there's so many things that need to be tweaked or touched, and I don't know where to start and where do I begin? And really, you don't have to do everything, and everybody can pick a piece and chip away at whatever it is. As Jasmine is chipping away through Share the Mic and her initiatives, JC is chipping away through his initiatives, Jesse is doing things through his initiatives, and people can support each other's projects and progress. And at the end of the day, the issues are all moving forward. The solutions are all moving forward, and you don't have to do it all by yourself. Would you say, JC?
Yes to the 10th power. I think it's brought it up.
Oh, there it goes. Okay.
There you go.
Oh, go ahead.
I think of, like my parents' generation, we talk about the good old days. It's like, oh, everything's falling apart. Why can't we go back to the good old days? And I go, again, it's one of these things we hear again and again and again and again. We start believing that it's true. And I go, I hope that what we're doing today isn't going to bring us back to the good old days, but it's going to progress us towards what we are learning because we are entering into conversation, because we are adjacent to or partnering. We're dealing with the things that we haven't dealt with yet. Someone asked me recently, like big question. It's like, how do I find peace? Like someone was on the struggle. And I was like, well, I find peace through daily conversation with people I don't know yet. And the response was, great. How do I find that? How do I find conversation on the daily with people I don't know? And in this capitalistic machine that we have, we've never created access that's easy to conversation. We created easy access to so many things that we valued, things that we saw profitability in. What if we started creating, and again, I've seen it through everyone on this screen. I mean, Shayla, you're the newest Minnesotan here, and you're the reason why we're all here right now on a Friday night. Like, Ericka conversations, Jasmine's through conversations, Jesse's through conversations. access to, yes, it's uncomfortable. Yes, we whoops. Yes, we stumble, struggle, fall. Then we do the opposite of those things, and we stand up and we move. So I think this is one of those moments where I'm filling my tank again, being in conversation with you through this. So thank you.
And thank you all for joining me. So Jesse, Jonathan has a question or some questions here. I'll pop all the graphics up and I'll let you see if you can weigh in on this one. Okay, so Jonathan Parker is saying about race, since race is not a scientific reality, genetically all human beings are way too close to divide people. Should we do more in our education systems to abolish the idea of human race? Then he goes on and says the genetics of racial division just aren't there. There are only tiny adaptations that have no great genetic meaning. Europeans are Black people that adapted to a colder climate, hence the loss of a certain level of pigmentation. And all human beings are Black people that adapted to some climatic effects.
So Jonathan, you're way deeper than I am. I'm gonna just give you that credit right there. So here's what I would say. I think that I had a conversation with someone who asked the question similarly, but in a different way of saying, hey, do we focus too much on the diversity dimensions that we all carry? Do we focus on that so much that we miss just the piece of people being human? And should I focus more on being a human? And while I understood the sentiment of where the person was heading, and understand that race, it is something that was created, we can't hide or deny that we all have different diversity dimensions. What I mean by that is exactly what everyone has basically shared, right? You show up some way. So I not only show up as a male, I show up as an African-American male. I show up as an African-American male who was born in Jackson, Mississippi, who have parents from the South, who understood my history and my culture before I was probably 8 years old, because it was passed down and taught to me. I also was the kid who had to do Black History projects when it wasn't Black History Month, right? And so everyone comes with different dynamics just simply based on the culture that we were exposed to or that we experienced. Some people may have grown up in the Midwest. Some people may have grown up on the East Coast. Some people may have grown up in a whole different aspect. And to, I think, Ericka's point, right? Black folks, white folks, women, men, we're not monolithic. And so you can have two people who look the same or he even grew up on the same block, and they could have completely different experiences based on their experience and their exposure. What I do think we need to focus on, so I say that to kind of give context. I do think we do focus too much a little bit on our differences, but there's danger in also focusing and highlighting those commonalities and not going deeper. So the real answer to the question is, how can we treat each individual as an individual? So if JC shares something with me, how do I honor JC's story and really dive into that and ask more questions instead of us lumping JC in a whole sea of people that look like JC, and so on and so on. I think the other piece is what we really need to do and get in that practice of one, I would say, understanding self. So we spend so much time with inundated with data, with statistics, things that are going wrong. We forget that we need to focus on ourselves first. Like the analogy of, put your oxygen mask on, save yourself first before you try to save somebody else. We do a lot of trying to save other folks and educate other folks, but we don't educate ourselves. Then I would say the second thing is understanding others. So once we take the time to understand who we are, what we like, what we don't like, where we come from, what our backgrounds are, whatever that is, now understand other people. What do they like? What do they dislike? Where do they come from? What have their experiences been? Once you do understand yourself, then you understand others. Then number 3, you can make the necessary adjustments and adapt. And I don't think we do that well. So to everyone's point, right? We get so uncomfortable, or we get locked in fear, or we get too worried about being the only, or we don't even ask the question. So we don't have the opportunity to make the adjustments and adapt. So I answered your question, but in a completely different way.
That's okay. That's totally fine. And that's the beauty of conversations like this, because we all bring something different to the table. And I appreciate you contributing that. Jasmine, I know you wanted to mention something on service through conversation as well. I think you're on mute. Unmute. Yep.
There we go.
There
Sorry
you
about
go.
that.
Awesome.
I think really what shifted my focus really with Share the Mic was recognizing that this was a collective experience that everyone was experiencing. And it's not just about me in my world, but it's about us as humanity, the collective we that I think sometimes we forget to think about because we think about me, my, mine, and ours. And so, it's that MLK quote that everybody always shares on MLK Day. Everyone can be great because everyone can serve. But what does that really mean? And how can you use conversation as a part of service? Going back to that simple hello, you never know what someone is dealing with in a day. And by you just saying hello, you acknowledge their humanity. You see them. Every store that I go into these days, or every restaurant that I pick up food from or eat outside at, I always tell the people, thank you so much for being here. It really means a lot, because we know that everyone is dealing with so much. And not only are people dealing with the pandemic, this racial awakening, but life is happening. I lost a cousin at the beginning of the pandemic, not from COVID. And so when I would talk about losing her and that pain and the grief, everyone would want to bring it to COVID. And I'm like, it's not even COVID related, but COVID multiplied the experience because we couldn't be with her, we couldn't grieve her. It affected it, but normal life pains and normal life joys are happening. So we need to recognize and ask ourselves, how can I serve my fellow human being?
Wonderful. I wanted to make sure I get these comments here from some folks that are weighing in. Kim says, Jasmine's points are great food for the soul. Jasmine, your words are a critical reminder that we all have the power to show up and support someone with simplicity and authenticity. And we also have Mary Angel Gomez. What Jasmine said reminds me of Brené Brown's work. Authenticity is a choice to show up and be real. And we all have the power to choose to show up for others with empathy and compassion. And then Jonathan Parker saying, totally agree. And identification is highly subjective. My skin color has never been an indicator of identity. For example, I hardly have white heroes. I experience different modes of self-recognition. We have about 3 minutes left, and I know I've got the most amazing folks. They were all long-winded, in fairness, but I want to give everybody a chance. And if we go like a couple minutes over, it's fine. But I just want to give everybody, if you want to leave everybody with one point, what do you want them to know when they leave this conversation? JC, you can go ahead and start.
So I have something written on a whiteboard right above my computer here that says, What is the value of the ordinary things in your life? I think we get trained to think of the things that are right there, like a conversation, like Jasmine's hello, like looking at a room of people and wondering what stories are there, or Jesse being the receiver of a perceived discomfort or a question with no easy answer. If we value the ordinary things for all that they're worth, I think a lot of these things we're talking about become a little bit easier for people, or a little bit more understanding of why we take the time to engage in them.
Excellent point. And Ericka, I'll come to you next.
Yeah, mine is from Man's Search for Meaning. And I love this quote in the book. It's forces beyond our control can take away everything that we possess, except for one thing, the freedom to choose how we respond. And so response over reaction.
I love that. Let's see. Jesse, would you like to go next?
Yep, I'm gonna follow JC's suit. There's a piece on my wall that says inhale courage, exhale fear.
I love that. And Jasmine, last but not least.
Yeah, I'm going to close with those simple rules we learned as a young child. Hello, thank you. How are you doing? I loved JC's earlier example of reading Jesse's point and out being able to move, and him saying, "Hey, I'll come and I'll move with you." How many times do we see things? Do we read things? Do we hear things? And we just let it sit? No, let's say, "Hello, how can I help you?" And thank you.
I love that. I just heard it would be maybe last week. I was talking to a psychiatrist about, like, with 9/11 coming up, we got a group of people together that had different experiences around 9/11. And as they shared their stories, I said, what do you hope that people take away from us all coming together to have this conversation? And one of the things that he said, and I think it fits for our conversation today, he said he would tell his daughter that when you meet people, assume before you even say hello that people have trauma. And for that reason, be kind and just go into any interaction with kindness, because you don't know the weight that someone else is carrying. You don't know the pain that they came into that space with. So assume anybody you don't know, they're dealing with trauma, and be sure to be kind and say hello, as Jasmine shared. And as all of you have talked about today, just holding space for conversations, creating space for conversation. It's an opportunity for all of us to move forward, to grow each other. Maybe you reach somebody that, you spark something in them, or maybe they want to learn something they didn't really realize that they needed to learn. And it's because, we took the time to show up as we are, doing the things that we enjoy. And for some of us, the things that we enjoy involve creating space. So I'd like to thank you all for joining me. Before we go, I want to quickly share this. The next conversation, I'm excited about this one too. This is going to be on crafting a new life. And so I'm going to be this will be coming up on October the 1st. Danielle Steer, she's the founding executive director for Lunar Startups, as well as Mimi Salam. She's from Ethiopia, grew up in Ethiopia and Eritrea, now lives here in the Twin Cities. Claudia Gutierrez, owner of Hamburguesas El Gordo. Rosaline Frederick, CEO and founder of Rosaline's Candles, and Fabiana Peterson of Feel Fabulous with Fabiana. And so what I think is super cool about the conversation that we're going to have, a lot of the folks that'll be participating in that, they are from Cameroon, from Brazil, from Mexico, from Ethiopia, and they're all here carving out their space and living out what the American dream is for them. And so we're going to have that conversation about what that journey was like for them individually, what they've learned along the way, and then talk about some of the resources that are available in the community for women, people in LGBTQ communities, immigrants communities. If you are looking to start something, organizations like Lunar Startups exist as spaces that are looking to grow and help you evolve what you're doing and reach other audiences. So I'm so excited to bring all of them in for that conversation. And I'm very thankful to all of you for joining me for this conversation. If you all can hang around for 1 second, I'm going to end the broadcast, and I'll talk to you behind in the backstage area in just a second. Thanks so much for watching, everybody.